Welcome to the Goal Podcast, news and commentary from Gun Owners Action League, your leading voice for the Massachusetts gun owner.
I'm Jeff, across the table from Garrett, on a beautiful snowy weekend.
Yeah, man. Snowy, I guess it's wintertime.
This isn't so bad. It's like a nice, light, fluffy, aesthetically pleasing snow. It's not the cold, wet, sloppy.
1,200 pounds per shovel full. Yeah. Gross.
So I'll take it for the weekend too. It's once the work week starts, get out of here. But
yeah, I'd prefer not for the weekend.
But we got to start off this episode. I have to make a correction.
Uh-oh.
I misspoke. I misremembered and misstated in the previous episode talking about the lawsuits. I said in the previous episode, the Attorney General of Minnesota is Alvin Bragg. Alvin Bragg's the DA in Manhattan. The Attorney General of Minnesota is Keith Ellison. So
that's right.
Go to the previous episode, cut out Alvin Bragg, insert Keith Ellison, and
doesn't matter. I mean, ideologically, there's not all that much difference.
They're two peas in a pod as far as firearms are concerned, and as far as their political ideologies, I think are pretty well aligned. But in the interest of accuracy.
Of what is it? Intellectual honesty and, journalistic integrity. So this is I guess technically our second episode for 2025, but it's the first one that we're recording in 2025. So as the new legislative session gets underway, the legislation is wasting no time in filing their nonsense. So what is it? HD 49 is the first anti-bill out of the Massachusetts legislature for this legislative session. Yay, cue the cheerleaders, right? So this they file this one all the time. This is very, very boilerplate stuff, but it's the one that requires state investment accounts, retirements, etc. Everybody has to divest from firearms manufacturers.
Yeah, we see the same role, or the same stuff that comes through every year.
Every time.
And you would think that post Chapter 135 that all of the firearms issues have been magically resolved. Right, that's what we were told. That's what we were sold on. But
they said it was an emergency and everything. Right?
Well, apparently, so the top-down review that was conducted so painstakingly and so thoroughly, obviously missed a whole bunch of stuff because we're going to see the same slate of stuff that we always see that comes through.
Garbage.
I'm sure before long we'll see the Dave Linsky full semi-automatic ban. All of those same things.
We will. And funny you should mention the semi-auto ban, because right out of Colorado, did you see this yet?
I did.
Brand spanking new. Colorado's, what is it? Senate Bill 3, right? Talk about right at the opening bell. They're proposing a law that would essentially ban all semi-automatics in the state that have a detachable magazine.
Which is pretty much
everything. It's everything.
It's all of them.
Yeah. Yeah, they tried to, couch it in words that says, as long as, it's an enumerated list, but, certain regulatory agencies within the state have the power to determine what's on that list unilaterally. And then elsewhere, the language basically boils down to everything that has a detachable magazine.
Well, if that's the case and it's an enumerated list, I want to see the list. Show me that you wrote down every single SKU of every single semi-automatic firearm that takes a detachable magazine. Every single SKU of Ruger 1022, every single SKU of...
No, they want to leave they want to leave it open so that they can ban guns basically on a whim. That's what it is. Well, then it's a framework for,
Then it's not an enumerated list. So
right.
that for me is if you're going to claim you've done the work, let's show me your work.
Well, in any case, it basically boils down to a 100% semi-auto ban. Who knows what's going to happen? It does actually have some co-sponsors. This has been filed there before, but this time it's got co-sponsors. I don't know what
to make a name for themselves. But I'm surprised for a state like Colorado that has so much backwoods area, so much
but there's a lot of
open space.
for every Kansas leaning town, there's a Vale and an Aspen and a
which is ridiculous.
Boulder. So it's really, I don't know, there's really no telling. So I guess it's gonna, if it passes and if it makes it all the way through the process, I don't know whether Jared Polis will sign it. I guess we'll see. But even if he does sign it, it's blatantly unconstitutional. It can't, I'm talking big here, but it doesn't sound to me like it can possibly pass a constitutional challenge.
So I look at this as why are they allowed to continuously attempt to violate the law or to violate the rights of people with just utter impunity?
Because the voters allow them to. And it really boils down to that. The only people that can hold them accountable is the electorate, and the electorate chooses not to.
Well, then there needs to be a greater consequence. We need to figure something out other than to say, hey, this hyper concentrated pocket, gets to play dictator to the rest of the state.
That's how it works. That's how it currently works.
And Massachusetts is much the same way. You have that inside the 93 circle that says we're going to tell everybody else how to live their life.
Sure. And people out in Western Mass don't get a say. But yeah, I mean,
like how many times can you attempt a crime? Like attempted criminal behavior is a crime unto itself. So why to simply say it's up? Well, the voters are going to have to do something 2 years from now or 4 years from now or 6 years from now to maybe hopefully not have their rights continuously infringed upon.
Yep. But
I don't know.
That's how it goes. So switching topics, Sig Sauer, Romeo 5 red dots are subject to a recall. This came out just the other day.
Which this isn't a performance recall.
No.
It's not a recall in the same way of other things.
It's fun to stick it. It's fun to stick a needle in Sig Sauer and say, "Oh no, what a shock! Another recall." But this one's kind of So this one affects the Romeo 5 red dot sites manufactured 23 and 24, including models SOR 52001, 7400579, which is a part that's included in SKU SOR J53101. This recall boils down to the battery compartment and the fact that the 2032 battery is too easily accessible and doesn't have the right markings on it that are required by the federal government. So basically it's seen as a choking hazard, the battery. So,
yeah.
So the affected sites,
they didn't put on there to tell you to not try to swallow batteries.
Right. The affected sites have a knurled battery cap and the letter K or M at the end of the serial number. You can contact Sig Sauer to get a free retrofit kit, which basically is a new battery cap and a new instruction manual that says, don't eat the battery. So,
I mean, presumably I would go venture to say it's a child safety thing.
It is, but
if your child has your pistol to the extent that they can get the battery compartment open and then swallow and choke on the battery, I feel like that's far down the list of things that have gone wrong.
Right. That's not the biggest problem. But anyway, it's a CPSC thing, consumer protection, et cetera. So if you have one of these red dots, just contact SIG and they'll send you for some stuff to straighten it out.
It's the administrative state for you.
There you go. So we are into 2025. And as we've been kind of alluding to the last few episodes, 2025 does mark the 250th anniversary of the events of 1775.
Yeah, the Battle of Lexington and Concord, April 19th.
April 19th, coming up just in a few months. So we thought that, it'd be cool to do like some historical snippets of like the run up and some important events and things like that kind of ran up, kind of led up and set the stage to what happened in April.
Yeah, the battle didn't happen. It wasn't in a vacuum. It wasn't a one-off situation. It was something that had been brewing and coalescing for a very long period of time that led up to people saying, listen, here's now the line in the sand. It wasn't an arbitrary thing where someone just said, oh, today we're going to
yeah, right.
Today we're going to wage war against the greatest standing army in the world.
Red coats. Let's those scallywags. So I guess if you're going to set the stage, you got to kind of do a brief run up, right? The story so far, I guess, as we're kind of putting it, because even if we're going to track the historical stuff starting in January of 1775, it goes back even way further than that, like a lot further.
Oh, sure.
That. So it's fair to kind of set the stage. So from where we are in January of 1775, the story actually goes back, more than 100 years from this point. So for about a century by this point, from the late 1600s to the mid 1700s, Great Britain and France are engaged in what might best be described as a long and kind of awkward game of tug of war over North America, involving skirmishes, full-blown wars, grumbling, bitching and moaning, etc. Yeah.
that's the longer.
Right.
That's the longer. France and Britain have been battling each other out since about like 1100 AD.
Yeah.
I think of all of those years, centuries, about a third of the time they've been at war or fighting with each other over something.
Exactly. So in the time period we're talking about, there's some pretty evocative names like King William's War, Queen Anne's War, King George's War. None of these are particularly decisive until the French and Indian War, which we know as the kind of the North American theater of Europe's 7 Years' War. The broad conflict over, the real estate of North America and who has the right to set up colonies there. So things really kind of came to a head at that point. The French relied on their Native American alliances to make up for basically being outnumbered by the British like 30-1. It actually worked out pretty well for the French for a while, as a young lieutenant colonel in the Virginia militia by the name of George Washington discovered at Fort Necessity. So eventually, Britain's deeper pockets and superior logistics did come back and win the war. After the Treaty of Paris in 1763, this is the first Treaty of Paris, 1763, France was relieved of most of its North American real estate, leaving Britain as the dominant colonial landlord. But it was a victory that came with a pretty hefty price tag.
Yeah, war wasn't cheap. War isn't cheap now. It wasn't cheap then.
Certainly not. Certainly not. So the war nearly doubled Britain's national debt at the time, ballooning it to pretty astronomical for the day, 133 million pounds. Think about that now. But for the day, it was a hell of a lot of money. In order to cover their costs, the British hit upon this brilliant idea. Let's tax the colonies.
Of course.
Why not? Those colonists had just benefited from the protection of the greatest military on the planet. Surely they'd be willing and eager to contribute. Unfortunately, the plan overlooked a crucial detail. The colonists were not going to cough up money without getting something in return, like, for example, representation in Parliament. What followed was a textbook lesson in how to basically alienate a population. The British rolled out a series of punitive taxes and regulations, the Sugar Act, the Currency Act, Stamp Act. Every new measure was met with increasingly vocal resistance on the colony side, culminating in the famous rallying cry, no taxation without representation. Parliament never backed down from a challenge, but they did repeal the Stamp Act and immediately responded with the Declaratory Act, which was a petulant little bit of legislation that basically said, okay, we're going to repeal the Stamp Act, but here's a new piece of legislation that says that we're in charge 100% in the colonies. We can do whatever we like. Meanwhile, in the aforementioned colonies, tempers were flaring. The Boston Massacre 1770 was the skirmish that left 5 colonists dead, fueled anti-British sentiment, thanks in no small part to Sam Adams and Paul Revere, who launched what might be called the first Great American Propaganda Campaign.
Oh, yeah. They sent letters on like the fastest ships, the clipper ships, to get back to England to, control the narrative.
A few years later, in one of the earliest overt acts of violence against the British, Rhode Islanders boarded HMS Gaspee in Narragansett Bay, shot the captain in the groin, set the ship on fire.
Dirty Rhode Islanders.
Man, in 1773, the Sons of Liberty decided to redecorate Boston Harbor with 342 chests of tea. As you can imagine, this did not go over well in London.
Destruction of government property. And also a big reason why we're not a tea drinking culture. We're a coffee drinking culture.
Parliament retaliated to the Boston Tea Party with what are known in the colonies as the Intolerable Acts, which was a set of punitive measures so severe that they practically dared the colonies to rebel.
Yeah, the British really wanted to put the colonists under their boot and force them into compliance.
Yeah, and they thought that they could do that from, miles away on
breaking the spirit.
By late 1774, the First Continental Congress had convened in Philadelphia. Boycotts, which were enforced by committees of correspondence, were in full swing, and militias were mobilizing faster than you could say Minuteman. Massachusetts, always eager to be the center of attention, became the epicenter of resistance with the countryside under de facto Patriot control. The Redcoats holed up in Boston like guests pretty much overstaying their welcome. As 1775 dawned, the colonies were teetering on the brink of revolution. While some still clung to the hope of reconciliation, the writing was very much on the wall, or, maybe scratched onto a keg of gunpowder. The British Empire was about to discover just how troublesome its American colonies could be.
Yeah, and those sentiments were reflected not just in the colonies, but in England, too. There were people in England who said, listen, just leave them alone. Let it go. Yeah. Let them do their thing.
It's not worth it. You can't win. It's going to wreck commerce. It's going to... Yeah.
And truthfully, at the time, they were still British citizens.
Yeah,
They were still Englishmen.
Yeah.
So there were people that said,
Whether they
listen,
were
we're not waging war against our own people over a financial piss and moan contest here.
The idea of independence was starting to gain some credence, but it was still just an idea. Most people, or a lot of people, still considered themselves British subject. Reconciliation was still a hope and not war. So that's where we are right now.
Yeah. Well, and, historically speaking, it's really not all that different from today of how media and entertainment always play into the public.
The zeitgeist,
the public temper.
Yeah.
So I went back and here's a song that everybody learns as a kid. But most people don't know exactly where it comes from. It's the song Yankee Doodle. I mean, a classic American song.
Yeah, and people look at it as a patriotic, it
is a patriotic song.
And it is, but...
And eventually someone asks, okay, what are these lyrics? They're so comically don't make sense in a modern context. But the song Yankee Doodle was, I would say, like the original American diss track. Like this is pre, East Coast, West Coast, Drake versus whoever Drake's beefing with now. But we all know the lyrics. So Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony, stuck a feather in his cap, called a macaroni. So the general tune of this song is thought to originate in like an early 18th century Ireland. It was a song by the name of All the Way to Galway, and I actually got a clip of it for you. There's speculation that some similar sounding lyrics may have originated from a Middle Dutch harvest song that was kind of just gibberish that people would sing along with while working. But the lyrics that we know were written by Dr. Richard Shuckburgh in the mid-1750s. So as we were talking about with the French and Indian War, the British fighting the French. So Shuckburgh was a British military surgeon in upstate New York. And despite the British ultimately winning the war, they suffered some horrific losses along the way. And a lot of the British laid a good chunk of the blame and looked down upon the colonial militias, who they felt were unprofessional, crude, cowardly. The British Army was the British Army. They wanted the colonists to, hey, you also need to fight to defend your land.
Sure.
And, there's probably some truth that the colonists weren't particularly motivated, like we talked about.
Well, they're farmers. They have bigger things going on.
Well, this is a centuries long headbutting contest between France and England of who's the bigger person to control however much part of the world. And a lot of families have been in the Americas for 5 or 6 generations. So this whole time they've sort of been on their own with really not a lot of help from Britain. Like Britain was kind of this absentee landlord. So fair to say for the colonists, it was hard to, get excited, get involved. So as a result, they see the colonists break formation more often. They see them retreat more often. So for the proper British soldier, you didn't want to have a militia on your side.
Because they look down on them. They're not professionals. Bunch of, when British general called them rabble in arms, remember, right? Famous phrase. But yeah, they were like uncultured, unprofessional farmers and laborers.
Yeah. And I'm sure you can picture as a military surgeon, Shuckburgh saw the worst of the worst.
Oh, sure he did.
Battlefield medicine in the 1770s was nothing like it is today.
Yeah.
So he wrote the lyrics. So where the lyrics come from, so it's believed that the term Yankee comes from... There's some kind of competing theories. It's either directly from the Dutch word Jank, which is an equivalent name of Johnny, but it's like an insulting thing, like you're a hick, a rube, That
makes sense.
But there's also some thought that it was a mixture of Yankees.
Okay.
So which would translate to John Cheese. So like...
John Cheese.
So either Johnny, John Cheese, but you kind of get the
you start getting a flavor of what he was
temperament of
about,
what he's trying to say here. And it was more of a popular thing in New York because at the time New York was much more heavily Dutch. It was known as New Amsterdam.
Yeah. Yep.
And also a doodle, as found in the Old English dictionaries, meant like a fool or a simpleton. So like, here's Johnny Cheese the moron. Like
It's pretty clear how he feels about him.
Yeah, and this was the line that I never understood as a kid, but the whole stuck a feather in his cap and called it macaroni.
Yeah.
I never could figure out,
thought about what that meant.
other than like a rhyme scheme, I guess. But macaroni, no surprise, was another insult.
Yeah.
So
Like a fop.
in England at the time, there was this particular subculture of wealthy, upper class young British men who would commonly, do that coming of age backpacking around Europe thing that, so many people do. So even back then, Italy was a very desirable destination, and a lot of them would develop taste for Italian pasta and cuisine and all the arts and things that Italy had to offer. So when they would come back, they were these, hoity-toity guys that were concerned with, fashion and
Very
cuisine and opera and poofy and
all of those things.
So since they were seen as these kind of bourgeois, more involved in the pleasure of lives, a little less masculine, a little more, what the British thought was effeminate.
Yeah.
Anything along those lines, people would call macaroni or say you were in like the macaroni club. So if you had, the fancy shoes, how macaroni of you, So really the whole song is like, here comes, Johnny Cheese the moron who doesn't even have a proper horse, pretending like he's some kind of, high class British fop. Saying that the colonists were low class, ignorant, soft. And truthfully, there are historical accounts that suggest that the British, fife and drum corps on the marches to Lexington and Concord were playing Yankee Doodle as an insult to the colonists, like a taunt. Like,
yeah,
we're not taking you seriously. Here you are, a bunch of poofs, bunch of ignorant poofs out in the woods. Well, we're going to come set the record straight.
So Johnny Cheese the moron, takes that song, owns it, and turns it back around and makes a patriotic tune out of it.
Yes, didn't even change the lyrics. They just said, "Hey, we're going to own it now."
It's like, fine,
and it's ours.
It's ours. It's going to be our rallying.
So it became this huge rallying song. Huge rally. And to this day, everybody learns the song as a kid. Fascinating story. And over the years, there's been a lot of lyrics that have been added to the song.
Yeah,
and it's been extended.
Yeah.
Yep. And you can see, as the lyrics go on, they become slightly more positive and. Less as a backhanded insult to the American colonists, but coming into the Battle of 1775 and in the big picture, this is a very amazing piece of American history.
All right, joining us tonight, Mike Harris, Goals Director of Public Policy, is joining us to talk about, what are we talking about?
Legislation. Dun, dun, dun.
Oh, everybody's going to be on the edge of their seats.
Oh, I'm sure. Riveted.
Electrifying.
All the success that firearms owners have had in the legislature in the past couple of years. Oh, yeah.
Well, before we get into that, so there's been a couple Supreme Court updates since the last time we laid tape. So Snope v. Brown, which is the challenge to Maryland's assault weapons ban, that's been rescheduled for the release date of this episode, which is Friday, January 17th, along with Ocean State Tactical v. Rhode Island. That's Rhode Island's ban on standard capacity magazines.
The most onerous one in the country, right?
It was like listed and then relisted and distributed for conference last Friday, and then we didn't hear anything about it, and other cases were granted cert.
Now we're just waiting.
And then, the following Monday, bang, bang, both of them relisted for Friday again. I don't want to read any tea leaves, but I'm not terribly happy about that.
No.
Well, that one's a particularly interesting case because it actually talks about two different things, because Rhode Island's ban was retroactive.
Yep.
So it's looking at whether what they call the retrospective and confiscation ban on magazines in common use violates the Second Amendment. So that's the magazine ban just in general.
Yeah.
But also whether or not, essentially dispossessing citizens of their legally purchased and possessed property without any compensation.
Taking?
Yeah, it's a taking. That's why these things always come with grandfather clauses.
So that may be one that they, like, I would hope be more willing to uptake because it tackles a couple more issues. It's not just purely a Second Amendment thing.
I hope so. We'll find out Friday.
What was the argument? There was an opinion that the Massachusetts court came out with 98 where they said that it was not a taking, the assault weapons ban.
Well, just because they said
I forget the reasoning.
Not
I don't have it off the top of my head. I wish I'd been a little more prepared to discuss that aspect of things, but it's okay. It's not really applicable unless it gets granted cert, which would be great.
Well, it'd be nice if it did.
Well, typically with that stuff, there's a grandfather date and all.
Yeah,
and
there's for that exact reason.
And there's legislation that we're going to be talking about that starts to sort out Massachusetts grandfathering date problems. The thing with Rhode Island was there was no grandfathering date, so you either destroyed your property or turned it into the state,
or lied about it,
or
became a freedom fighter.
Unfortunately, a couple of 2A cases that were distributed for conference last week were denied. Maryland shall issue versus Moore was denied cert. Also, Gravy Jennings was denied the Monday following the conference. So, unfortunately, those two are done. They're going back down to the. Well, they're just done because
they're just done.
Yeah,
they weren't even GVR'd.
So we got to see what happens with Snope and Ocean State Tactical. Yeah. But that's the doing at the Supreme Court. We'll keep an eye on it.
I gotta be. Ocean State Tactical is an objectively kind of a cool name. I know I'm not like a big tactical guy, but I don't know. I kind of like that. It's kind of cool.
I was preparing myself for you to say, yes, that's a 2A slam dunk constitutional case. And you're like, nah, it's a cool name.
No, I just think the constitutional takings aspect of it is interesting because they set themselves up for that.
Totally.
I don't think there's any precedent for that.
They could have avoided that by just saying, okay, there's a grandfather.
And you mean like every other state that's done it before?
So their argument is going to be the neutering aspect, right? They're going to say you can keep your magazines, but you have to neuter them and limit them.
That's part of the state's argument.
Argue.
But I don't think. I mean, who knows how first of all, who knows whether or not it's going to be accepted and granted cert? I mean, personally, I think that
it's interesting.
It's asking
enough
you to.
That I think that's the one that has the biggest question behind.
Irreparable. You have to permanently modify your lawfully possessed item into something else.
Yeah.
So they are depriving you of the product that you bought with the intention, with its designed intent.
Right.
But we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right, there we go. Supreme Court. More to say next time, I'm sure, unless they're both relisted again and again.
And we'll see. I don't know. I think that's the one that has the biggest chance is the Ocean State Tactical one. But I'm wondering if that will just apply to those types of laws, like laws that are written like that, or if they'll expand it into other states that have written their laws differently, like Massachusetts.
Yeah,
we'll see. But even with the Massachusetts law, so bringing it into Massachusetts, the Goal News recently came out, and I emailed you a couple questions about this guidance that's been put out towards law enforcement. So this LED or Law Enforcement Dimensions LLC.
Yeah.
I asked a couple of folks who I know, like, what's the deal with this group or organization? Apparently it's just an independent attorney who does some guidance stuff for
law enforcement agencies. So everything
in service and training.
Yeah. Similar to what Ron Glidden does for the state police. Yeah, similar, not the exact same function or
right. But everything that he does is seen through those particular.
True. Glass. And everybody I talk to obviously are like probably, gun folks that I happen to know.
Yeah. You're biased.
And they said, this guy's largely crap, but that's a personal opinion of whether they interpret things the same way.
Whatever the value judgment on the guy is, the value judgment, as far as I'm concerned, on what he said in that guidance, that's crap.
Is offensive. More than just crap, it's offensive.
Well, there's stuff in there that's just factly wrong.
Well,
it's just factually incorrect.
And there's also humongous Fourth Amendment concerns.
Well, yeah.
And Fifth Amendment concerns. If there's a policy out there that says, hey, if they say this, charge them with something else, then I think there's a Fifth Amendment argument that you can make. Yeah. Where now that that's public knowledge, by forcing somebody to, assert their Fourth Amendment rights, you're then going to, that causes them to self-incriminate.
Oh yeah,
on the back end. So, that might be dubious. That might be a little dubious.
For
but
people who are listening to this and have no idea what the hell we're talking about, check your Goal News. This came via the email chain from Goal last week. I don't think it's on the website.
It is on the website.
Is it on the website?
Yeah, it's on the Goal News tab.
The news tab. Yeah. All right. Okay. So it came out of like left field for a lot of people. We're like, what the hell are you guys talking about? So
we got it from left field. It kind of just came to us and we said, what the hell is this?
All right. So go ahead. Dive into it a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, so there was some questions. So Mass General Law. So this is, in the Chapter 140, Section 131. It says a license issued under the section shall be revoked or suspended on the occurrence of any event that would disqualify a holder from being issued the license in the first place, including if it appears that the holder is no longer suitable. And it says that any revocation or suspension shall be in writing and shall state the reason. This guidance says that the notice of revocation or suspension might be in writing and it puts it in quotes, in some other form, and then actually gives the specific example of verbally, in person, or over the phone.
Yeah, so to be clear, that's not law. That's the guidance that says that notification by other means.
Right. Which I would say, like, you're advising people to do something that directly contradicts MGL.
Yeah. Right, exactly. Yeah. They're not advising people. They're advising police officers to do something.
The law says writing. This lawyer says to cops, some kind of mean.
Well, you can just tell them.
Which is putting the, not to say, not to talk out of school. That's putting police officers in.
Well, sure it is. It's setting them up to get slapped in court.
Yeah, and it also shows the kind of double-edged sword of suitability, because if the licensing authority is like, that doesn't really make them unsuitable, but in the next town over, they're like, that guy's unsuitable. Makes him way unsuitable.
Did you see the shoes he was wearing? He's unsuitable. Yeah.
So,
but it does outline that not. So once your license has been suspended or revoked, it says that you are immediately to surrender firearms, ammunition, and any licenses.
Yeah, this is when you're asked. Sticks in my
and then it says that, which is a crime, according to MGL, but it says the best practice is to inform the suspect that they've had their license revoked, and if they ask for any sort of paperwork, warrant, any sort of documentation, to threaten them with criminal charges.
Additional criminal
charges, so that they will be more inclined to consent.
Outrageous.
That be like
offensive.
That is like, what? That's what the hell is that? So lawyers telling the cops to say, we're here for your guns because your license has been revoked.
And if you say, okay, let me see a warrant.
Yeah, show me a warrant. You say, well, if you let us in, you can avoid these other charges that we're going to.
Or just even saying, hey, you have to provide me that revocation in writing.
Yeah.
Yep. Well,
so the hypothetical I sent you to see if this actually, under this guidance, let's say the hypothetical me gets in an argument with an off-duty cop over a parking spot at the grocery store. Under this guidance, it seems like all that officer would have to do is go back to their station, revoke my license based on suitability, and can be waiting for me on my doorstep at home for me to get home to say, we're confiscating your license and all your firearms. Yep. And then if I have any question, if I do anything other than just, absolutely, sir, and comply immediately, that I get 2 more charges. That they have the authority to arrest me and give me additional charges.
Well, they do have the authority to do that, but the fact that they are telling them to do that, and they're not just saying, hey, charge them with all of this stuff that applies, is where the problem lies. I mean, you're not, this is, it just feels gross. And, asking for a warrant and asserting your Fourth Amendment rights is not a crime.
No, it isn't. And it should not be, subject to.
You should not be made to feel that it is a crime. Exactly. Exercising one set of constitutional rights does not negate the others.
No.
So saying, I'd like to see a warrant, or I'd like to see the revocation of my license in writing, does not entitle them to threaten you with additional charges.
Especially when Mass General Law says they have to provide you that revocation in writing and cite the reason why.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that dude needs an education.
Yep. They also
Or to just not be such a scumbag. Like, what a slimy way to
why
think.
don't we start there?
Like,
Have you tried not being a dick?
I hate saying this out loud because it just feels like, it feels like weird, but like, what an un-American way of thinking. It just feels so antithetical to civil rights.
Yeah.
Like jurisprudence and just
the other podcast.
The spirit of the civil right just the spirit of civil rights in general.
Well,
Well, that's certainly, I think, on its face, the most like egregious thing that's completely unconstitutional and
that's disgusting.
Against the spirit of the law in just so many ways. But there was other stuff in here that I sent you.
A whole bunch. Yep.
One of the questions was, it says the license has a 90-day grace period after its expiration, regardless of whether you've renewed or not.
Right.
It goes on to say that after the grace period expires, a holder must be arrested for unlawful possession if their renewal had already been denied orally or in writing.
Orally.
So my question is, what suitability issue would exist such that you would deny a renewal that wouldn't justify revoking the license at the time? Where you say, like, all right, I don't think you're suitable to own firearms in 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. Like, to me, it doesn't make sense.
You're not wrong, Jeff. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. I think this is one of those like cover every hypothetical.
Yeah, you're pointing out you're pointing out not something nefarious, but something stupid,
an odd idiosyncrasy.
But when the law says
writing,
when the law says you,
I don't even know if it's bad writing. It's just it's an odd idiosyncrasy wherein they tried to cover every contingency,
right?
Yeah,
but especially
House doesn't have Jeff trying to thread every needle.
But I think,
as they say that,
I think that's what this is. Is them trying to thread as many needles as they can.
Yeah.
But as the law is written, it says your license shall be revoked on that occurrence. So that was and the third thing I sent you, which is in the same line, is it has to do with the ERPOs. And it says a red flag emergency risk protection order can be filed by any law enforcement officer who had an interaction with the respondent during the previous 30 days, or a healthcare worker who has provided services within the previous 6 months. Mm-hmm. So there's a similar question of like, what could be such an emergency where they don't file something for 6 months?
Well, I don't know.
Well, no, that's just a qualifier. That I think you're reading it differently than it's intended. And
Jeff,
I hate that you're making me stick up.
Massachusetts, where the governor waits 3 months to file an emergency preamble on a law.
Yeah,
emergencies.
I hate that you're making
me a long time.
I hate that you're making me stick up for this. But no,
that would be so like. That would be my argument going into a red flag hearing is if a nurse that I made a comment to 5.5 months ago says, oh, well, someone said this 5.5 months ago. It's an emergency now that it was an emergency then.
The legislative intent of putting the date on it probably is a limiting factor. It's like, somebody doesn't say, I saw the guy 12 years ago and I'm going to red flag him now.
So
that's to me, that's the intent.
Yeah. And not to give them any credit at all, which is any undeserved credit, but I think that's actually to protect the gun owner's civil rights. I mean, I don't think, it's just saying you have to have seen this person recently in order to make this assessment.
Yeah.
It's exactly what Garrett just said. You can't say, oh, I saw that guy 12 years ago. He's a bastard. Go get him.
Yeah.
I know. I'm just rolling that to, I think even 6 months is too long. Like to me, it should be somewhat proximal to what's going on right now.
Yeah.
I hate that you just made me defend this law.
I cordially disagree with your assessment.
No, it's fine. I think that was the intent, and that's the way. That was my reading of it.
So to check the details of this and Gold's reaction to it, which was like, pretty strong.
Yeah.
It's like, what the hell is this?
Me, Jim, and John sat in Jim's office reading this thing like with our eyes falling out of our head.
Hell? Yeah. All right. So check the Gold website, check your Friday news, and read up on it. So moving on, the reason that you're here today is actually to talk about Gold.
Just as fun.
Was to talk about our upcoming legislative agenda. So as we talked about last episode and the episode before, actually, we're just now getting into the 194th General Court of Massachusetts.
Brand new legislative session.
Brand new legislative session, which will,
So I
get
can
things kicked off.
Yeah.
So,
On top of all of Goal's new legal work and the going through the judiciary and starting on the lawsuits, we're still doing the legislation and
Yeah, we're still
advocacy
doing
and,
yeah.
and all this.
I mean, that's
stuff.
our- that's
still
our-
handling
still happening,
fundamental
yeah.
business.
that's our charge. That's our mandate. That's what we do. I'm taking over a lot of the main lobbying work from Jim. He's going to be handling a lot more of the big picture kind of stuff, and I'm going to be doing this day-to-day work mostly. So this is kind of my agenda at this point.
Well, so let's see it. What's going on?
So I'm calling it. So it's mostly based around dismantling Chapter 135.
Sounds good to me.
It doesn't cover every aspect of the bill that we have an issue, or of the statute, I should say, that we have an issue with. We don't have the bandwidth for that. So
I would say that some of it, well, you have an act restoring civil rights that
just
basically repeals the entire thing. So
that's what it does.
that's not nuanced. There's no excuse necessary about bandwidth. I mean, that's pretty blatantly going to, I intended to shut the whole thing down.
Exactly.
And then following that, you have a bunch of smaller bites.
Yeah. So we're calling it we're joking around. We're calling it the hatchet and scalpel approach, which is just a nerdy thing to say, but
it was what was the movie Under Siege? The Army's a broadsword, not a scalpel. I love that.
Exactly. Yeah. So what we're doing is we're going after the bill as the bill. I keep saying that the statute as a whole, and then we're going after certain sections, whole cloth, that we think we have a more of an argument on, things that we have an established principle on. Like we're trying to repeal the entire red flag section. We're working on repealing the registration requirements, repealing the firearms roster, repealing magazine restrictions, repealing the assault weapons ban, repealing the ammunition reporting requirement, and also the penalty for loaning money using firearms as collateral. That one stuck in my craw. that bothered me a lot. So I just decided to file that one on my own.
Well, yeah.
That bugs the hell out of me. So those are kind of the big ones. But then we're also going to do a few small things that we think we can get a little bit of traction on.
Okay.
And maybe make a little bit of news out of, just to kind of get messaging out.
Well, there's nothing wrong with throwing the deep ball.
No, of course.
And saying like, hey, here's best case scenario.
Right.
Because legislation isn't like a lawsuit where you risk setting bad precedent and then having further precedent to deal with. So there's you can throw legislation at them, and if it works, great. And if it doesn't work, okay, we're moving on to the next thing. So, and that's what the anti-civil rights groups has done. So
they do anyway.
There's nothing wrong with just flooding them with a bunch of stuff and forcing them to deal with it.
So now you have a list of so far. It looks like 17 items here.
Yeah, and there's 2 that aren't on the list.
Okay. 17,
no.
18,
Do you have the last 2, the black powder?
Maybe
yeah,
not.
you do.
So 19 then.
Sorry, 19. Yep.
All right. So you know what? Dive into whatever level of detail you feel appropriate. The first one is an act restoring civil rights. This is the overall full repeal of Chapter 135. Now, we should note that that you are filing this in the House of Representatives. Concurrent with this, the coalition, Civil Rights Coalition, Toby
filed with
Toby's
Peter,
group,
with Senator Durant.
With Senator Durant. So they filed a very similar bill in the Senate.
The same effect. Yeah, in the Senate. Yep.
Great. Good for them. Good for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's do it. All right. So whatever level of detail you think is appropriate, go dive on into these things.
So the next one is just a repeal of the ERPO sections. It's all the red flag stuff. Just repealing that completely because it's unconstitutional and it sucks.
There you go. There you go. Nothing else needs to be said.
And then we have an act securing personal property, which is it repeals all registration requirements in mass gun law.
Beauty.
All registration requirements for everyone.
So this is everything. 140, 121, 120. Yep.
And then we have so all of the titles you'll notice have really soapy names. They're just
they're also I'm noticing they're all framed positively.
Yes. You got to do that. You don't want to.
Right.
Exactly.
It's like, yeah.
Restoring civil rights,
Right.
securing civil rights protection.
And act slapping down the assholes.
Which would be great. That would be, to have that on record would be wonderful. But,
I just want to hear that read out in the chamber. Yeah.
And then we have an act honoring the value of personal property, which would repeal the penalty for loaning money using firearms as collateral for loans.
Why would you not be able to use personal property as collateral for a loan if someone's willing to accept it?
And also some people
firearms are worth a lot of money.
Some freaking guns that are worth more than my house.
I know. I've physically held firearms that are worth more than my truck.
Yeah, I know. And it's nonsense that's even a thing that we have to even worry about. But so then we have an act relative to loaning personal property, which would eliminate the word loans from the registration requirements. So right now, if you loan somebody a gun, for more than 6 days, you have to report it as a transaction and register it under your name.
I have problem with that provision.
And it counts against your 4 transactions a year.
Yeah. So all of that flapping their lip service about mental health and stand up for your buddies and all,
that's
all gone because nobody who is in a position to need their guns, safely stored can do so without transferring.
Exactly. Because they don't care. That's not what it's about. It's literally just gum flapping.
It's about making firearms ownership hard.
Exactly.
Just like all of this stuff.
Yep.
So anyway, all right, go ahead.
An act relative to the freedom to purchase lawful goods repeals all firearm rosters.
Good.
I had fun with the titles. An act relative to standard capacity magazines. That's the only one that's really
standard capacity. Yeah.
That's the only one that's really on the nose.
Yeah.
It repeals magazine.
Standard everywhere else in the country.
This is when you're banking on the fact that probably a lot of the legislators don't read the bill.
Exactly.
So maybe they'll just say, "Oh no, this must be good."
So that would repeal all the magazine restrictions. And then we have an act protecting personal data in ammunition transactions.
Bam, shoot down the ammo requirements.
Which would repeal the ammunition reporting requirements at the point of purchase. And then we have an act restoring certain civil rights, which would repeal the assault-style firearms ban.
Oh, my God. Adopting that terminology is just so
just trading one euphemism for another. It's stupid and stupid and stupid.
Yeah.
An act promoting fairness in licensing. So I will tell you about 90% of the calls we get at Goal are from folks who are having a hard time renewing or getting their license for the first time. Mm-hmm. And a large percentage of those calls are from folks who are from out of state and are applying for their temporary license. And this is especially relevant to folks who are, trying to come to Massachusetts to do training or teach in Massachusetts or, just be here for business. They have the delays getting your out of state. Your temporary LTC have been
ridiculous.
Insane.
You can take like a year to get your freaking license,
and they only last for a year.
They only last for a year. Yeah.
So you're getting to the point where you have to start a renewal process for a license you haven't received
the day
yet.
You get it. Yeah, exactly. The one you haven't even gotten yet.
You haven't gotten it yet, and you need to get your renewal paperwork in.
So what our bill would do is it would create a grace period for temporary LTC holders that lines up with the grace period, forever grace period for in-state LTC and FID.
And because if you're a non-resident, you're going through the same process that everybody else is. They require
background checks,
but it's even more difficult because you're not there. Yeah.
There's no reason. There's no justifiable reason whatsoever why the grace period.
Exactly, and especially if you're not in the state as often as somebody who lives here, the threat is even smaller from you.
Yeah.
So, unless they're worried about like an invasion of Rhode Islanders into Massachusetts, this is nonsense.
It's not entirely out of the question.
Yeah, the only thing dangerous about them is their drivers. Get out of here.
All right, what's next?
So an act clarifying civil rights restrictions. It would fix the assault weapons grandfather date. So
everywhere, even now, months later, people are like, well, what the hell does grandfathering mean?
And it's the most confusing thing in the world. So what it would do is it would get rid of the separate date that applies to the enumerated weapons and copies or duplicates.
Yep.
And so it would get rid of the July date and just make it everything August 1st. We thought about I know that feels like a cop-out because we're not saying just get rid of the grandfather date. But like I said, we're filing a repeal of the assault weapons ban. Also, this is just a smaller fix, something that we think we might be able to actually get done.
It's a fallback.
If we convince the right people. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a fallback. And it's like, well, if you're filing to repeal Chapter 135, why the hell do you need to file all these other bills? It's like, well, because
pleading in the alternative.
Let's face it. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that would go a long way towards especially helping the folks that own stuff after 2016.
Yes.
So another one is an act relative to self-defense sprays. So this just gets rid of the new rules and puts the last set of rules back in place because they actually made sense.
Yeah, they kind of made sense insofar as you had to have restrictions at all.
It was Goal's language. And they got rid of it.
Yeah, and they screwed it up.
It's just a dumb, unnecessary fix. 12-year-olds can get mace, but you have to have a license for it. And then your FID doesn't cover pepper spray. It's the dumbest thing in the world.
It's pretty stupid.
It's horribly written. It's just dumb, and it was unnecessary. The next one is an act simplifying ammunition sales. So this is another stupid thing that they did that they thought was simplifying things, but it's really making it more difficult for folks. So what this does is it re-separates the firearms
and ammunition
sellers. So
because they have different requirements.
Exactly.
They have different legal requirements from a dealer's license standpoint. Like if you're going to be an FFL selling guns,
it's way more onerous.
And they wanted to like fold all of that into
having one license.
Stuff.
So in order to sell ammo or pepper spray, that's really the impetus behind this is pepper spray, because in order to sell that, you have to get a dealer's license
for guns.
Yeah, so you have to go through all this stuff. So this was really, I really wrote this with Carrie Ann O'Clair in mind. So she runs the Sabre pepper spray course for Goal, and she has a network of other trainers that do similar classes and throughout the state. And now they cannot supply their students with pepper spray to train
because they're not
gun dealers.
That is so stupid.
So that's really what I had in mind when I put this one together. Because
for a can of pressurized hot sauce,
it's nonsense,
pressurized hot sauce.
You could spray it on. You could spray it on a taco, and it would hurt. But
that's an aggressive taco.
Yeah, right. But that's really what I had in mind when I wrote that one up, because that was the part that really was the stupidest about the new requirements. So, it's dumb to have them as a single license with all of the requirements of an FFL / dealer's license right now. But in addition, the pepper spray issues is just makes it 10 times worse.
Ridiculous. Yeah. All right.
So then moving on, an act relative to protecting civil rights. I'm sorry. I had fun writing these. So this is another smaller fix. And what this would do is reduce the list of mandatory red flag reporters to those included in the previous version of the law. So
roll that back from educators, healthcare workers,
from everybody,
your neighbors, niece's cousin,
everybody's toe you step on throughout the day.
Right.
This would bring it back to family members.
Yeah.
Which basically
ought to be,
which is what it should be.
Yeah. If it's good, right. We have to caveat that if it's going to exist at all. Yes, we do not support red flag laws.
We do not support red flag laws.
But if they're going to be there, then they should be as limited as possible.
Exactly. However, we even less support the current version of it.
Exactly.
So, this is just another example of the scalpel. And that's another one here. So, an act removing civil rights, or an act removing certain civil rights restrictions. So this would just remove the word barrel shroud from the list of prohibited features.
As it should, for all of the confusion about, what about wooden furniture that goes under the barrel for the purpose of protecting your hand.
And it would also make Tavors legal again and Mini 14s and all this other stuff that is just, has always been legal. And, it's just stupid. So it would make it a 2-feature test again. It would fulfill the spirit of the law that they wrote. Yeah. Because including that was a cynical end run around, their inability to actually pass a semi-automatic ban.
Yeah.
So it would remove the barrel shroud one from the rifle and pistol list of prohibited features. And another thing I came across during my reading of it, this is kind of just an aside.
Yeah.
The language of the bill I keep saying that.
I wish
the language of this. I know the language of the statute says one of the prohibited features is the threaded barrel that would allow for a flash suppressor or compensator. It doesn't say flash suppressors are illegal.
It says the threaded barrel.
The threaded barrel.
Jesus.
So you can have it, you just can't use it.
So that's what it says. It says the threaded barrel is illegal, not the muzzle.
Well, I'm sure I can figure out a way to attach a flash hider without threading the barrel.
But I don't know.
A lot of duct tape works.
Yeah, but I just thought that was interesting. So a couple more. An act restoring constitutional rights. So I had to move on. I had to move on from civil rights.
There's so many different word combinations.
Exactly. So this would get rid of the semi-automatic restrictions on FID cards because that is one of the most offensive parts of this bill. That card that we trusted you to have semi-autos on for the last however many
years.
You can't have them anymore.
Right.
So
and all the people that have been hunting with their dads, Browning from 1952 or whatever the hell it was, they would have had to give them up.
Yeah. Or all the kids that are like learning how to shoot and firearm safety from plinking with a Ruger 1022.
Yeah, they can't do that.
Can't have those anymore.
It's like the number one rifle that you teach people to shoot with.
Yeah,
because it's going to be illegal because it's safe and easy to operate. And
exactly. So it's just that kind of stuff. So, an act relative to criminal manufacture and possession of certain weapons. So this would get rid of their. I hate saying ghost gun language and replace it with ours. So it was a version that we had filed the previous session, not the 193rd session, but the 192nd session. And it was the only ghost gun bill that got out of committee. So what it does is it focuses on, instead of prohibiting ownership of parts and 3D printers and stuff like that, it increases penalties on criminals, prohibited persons who have those items.
That's where you should be focused.
So
how dare you?
The actual
you sound like Senator Cream when you just said that. Because that's what she told us when we went in there. How can we differentiate between criminals and non-criminals? Oh, I don't know. I'm not in jail right now. How did you differentiate me from a guy who's supposed to be in jail? Like, it's just the dumbest
maybe it has to do with the fact that somebody committed a crime, and now we're not talking about what's the word? Malum prohibitum.
The state has been successfully determining that for me for the last 20 years in firearms license.
Well, yeah,
exactly.
I don't know.
So,
or how about this? When you arrest them, don't send them right back out on the street.
Yeah,
there's an idea.
Weird.
Craziness.
Yeah, super weird.
All right,
and then we have. This last one, so the black powder ammo exemption, I need to dig in a little bit more on this one. I don't know if we're going to get this one in under the wire, because it's about felons, the exemption for felons having black powder rifles.
All right. Previously, black powder guns didn't require you to have an LTC, right? Well, you had to have an LTC to purchase the ammunition components, but you could possess them, and therefore people who were statutorily disqualified from receiving an LTC could still hunt, etc., and using primitive firearms.
Yeah, and defend.
Do I have that completely right?
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah,
all right.
I think so.
Like we're saying, as even so, those unfortunate folks who, no judgment, got their post 1994 DUIs and were statutorily disqualified from having an LTC, they could still hunt on black powder.
Right.
For the last 2 weeks of December, freezing your butt off.
Yeah. But so this is designed to bring the black powder back into the realm of sanity.
Possibility for that. Yeah. Jim asked me to go into this one today, and I was like, okay.
Right on.
And the deep confusion, to be fair, under Chapter 135 is it creates like 3 different classes of muzzle loaders that didn't exist before.
Right.
So there's the truly
modern, there's the
truly primitive stuff.
And then there's the inline
the flintlocks, and then there's the inline that has
it's breech loading, but no, not breech loading, but like you put the
muzzle loading, but it uses the modern
the cap.
Well, it uses a modern shotgun primer.
Right.
But the thing that really sets the modern inlines apart is it has a modern receiver with a hammer and a sear and a trigger and that
different
assembly.
Thing is that some of these can actually be modified such that you can remove the barrel and replace it with,
Well, isn't that the ones that have a receiver? Isn't that the modern ones?
That's what he's talking about.
The inline ones are where they use a cap, right?
But they're usually break open and you put a 209 primer. Nothing is like really removable.
So that's what I meant when I said breech loading, because breech loading is the opposite of muzzle loading. Right. So I was thinking, wait a minute, you can break them open. You can break them open and put a cap in there.
Yeah, no, but the big caveat again is it's essentially treating it as a modern receiver and a modern firearm by extension.
Right.
So even though it's a muzzle loader with primitive technology, they're treating it as a modern firearm subject to the modern firearm requirements, registrations. It has to be transferred by an FFL in the state, even though that federally you can order one and they'll just ship it directly to your house.
That's how I got mine.
Yeah. I bought a CVA muzzleloader, ship it right to your front door.
So all of these bills, you've been burning the midnight oil, put them together. Yeah. We have. Are you prepared to name sponsors at this point or no?
Not yet.
Okay, fair enough.
We have a bunch, but we're not.
Okay,
we can go into that next.
No, that's fine. All right,
but suffice to say, it's all of our friends.
It's the usual suspects.
It's the usual suspects, right? All 3 of our friends in the legislature. No.
Yeah, I know.
Both of them?
No, I'm just. There's a couple of sponsors I'm working on that haven't traditionally filed stuff for us in the past, and I don't want to say anything out loud and without knowing knowing that they're going to do it.
Stay tuned and watch this space.
No, I'm just and it's exciting. I'm
good.
It's one of those like moments that is energizing a little bit. So
good. All right. So a few minutes ago, roll the tape back about 3 or 4 minutes. You said that these were bills that we're going to get under the wire. Why don't you spend a minute and tell us what that means?
I was going to get into that. So under the wire, by that I mean the deadline, the filing deadline. And what the filing deadline means is it's usually the 3rd Friday in January of the odd numbered year,
which is the first year of the session.
Exactly, the first year of the legislative session.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And what that means is if you get your bill filed before that deadline, it is guaranteed to go to a committee and guaranteed a hearing date. So
the 3rd Friday is actually the date of the release of this episode, which is January 17th.
There you go. It's January 17th. Yep. So
timely.
Yeah, exactly. So by getting these bills in before that date, they're guaranteed a hearing and they're guaranteed to get, at least a little bit of attention. Anything that's filed after that date goes to the Rules Committee, and the Rules Committee will then
decide whether
or not it gets assigned to a committee at all. And then that committee will
and we can imagine how friendly they are to our stuff. Yeah,
exactly. Especially now with the vitriol that leadership has for us, for Goal in particular. So this is just stuff we're working on getting into the legislature by the end of the week.
Excellent.
Most of them are all set, ready to go. Or just there's a couple I'm working on.
Right on.
For sponsors for. So
right on.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it sounds pretty comprehensive. I think you touched on most, if not all of the high points.
I tried. Like I said, there's a lot of other stuff in there that I would have loved to tackle, but like I said, I mean,
it's 100 and something pages. So yeah,
and there's also these are the things that we've gotten the most calls and attention on.
Yeah.
So I wanted to I didn't crowdsource it necessarily, but I kind of kept track of the things I was hearing about
sure.
and tried to go after those things first.
Well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So,
Yeah, you want to capture the biggest.
Well, people are going to complain about the
biggest
things that
things
impact their lives, right?
Exactly.
So, sure.
And some of the stuff, like I said, I mean, some of the smaller things, I think we might actually be able to get some attention and maybe some traction on. So
Good.
Sounds like it's been a nice relaxing January 2025 for you.
my eyes are going crazy. Like this like black and white spreadsheet I've been staring at for 9 days now. My eyes hurt.
Well, yeah, and as difficult as it is to parse out, when the bills are submitted and they're written, you're looking and with this line, that line, it takes actual effort to write
Just
that.
to be clear, this is not you sitting down and writing out an Excel spreadsheet. You have to actually put text together for these proposed bills.
I'm willing to put serious money on the table that in the last 2 weeks, you have put more effort into writing all of these pieces of legislation than Michael Day actually put into writing Chapter 135. You unfortunately don't have all the gun control organizations to write it for you to crib the notes.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know if I put in as much effort as Giffords in every town, but
Well, they also have teams of attorneys.
Exactly. So collectively they've done more, but But no, I
power to weight ratios there.
Exactly.
I'm on your side here.
I appreciate it. No, but I tried to tackle Jim and I went over this, and we tried to figure out what we were going to do, because we were kind of two minds of how we were going to tackle this legislative session, like in the first place, because with certain members of legislative leadership, we're persona non grata at this point.
You know what? I'm fine with that.
Me too.
People who get like, what's school doing? Why do they not understand? Because we're under their skin, and fine.
They're going to see us. I'm going to be up there at least once a week for the foreseeable future.
You're going to be there, and when these hearings happen, we'll be there.
Exactly.
And when,
we'll be testifying. Yeah. But at the same time, we were like, okay,
burr under their saddle.
Exactly.
Hey, listen, for every wave that crashes onto the beach, it pulls away a couple grains of sand and a couple grains of sand.
Exactly.
So there's nothing wrong with throwing it at them.
Exactly.
But greeting.
With our pivot to focusing on legal matters, we were kind of two minds, like how to approach this legislative session. Do we just go with the normal slate of stuff that we file every year, or do we just go for
on the offensive,
or do we go for things that we think we might actually get to tackle and get some attention on? So we went for the latter, and we're getting in under the wire on this. Ordinarily, the last 2 sessions I've worked for Goal, we've gotten all of our stuff in a lot earlier than this, but this time we were kind of debating things like up until last week. So,
well, there's certainly more factors to bring in.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about this time.
It's a good cross section.
I think
you got the wish list. You got the would be the nice to haves. You got the practical stuff. I think you got a good cross section of things here.
There could always be more, and there will be more in the future.
Of course,
this is a good sampling and certainly a good start.
And this doesn't and this list, as finite as it is, doesn't preclude us from filing things in the future.
Right. We're just trying to get this raft of stuff in under the wire.
Exactly. Yep.
Excellent. Well, good job, man.
Cool.
All right. I guess we'll keep an eye on what happens. So you got a little bit to get it in, and then
I'll try and come back next episode if you guys will have me, and we can go over what actually happened with our stuff, and who our sponsors were, and what the landscape of firearms legislation as a whole looks like for the session. It would be nice to go over that stuff too.
Yeah, because there's just a little teaser. We don't have to get into it, but there's been a bunch of legislation filed. Some from
good and bad.
So, some from our side, some from the other side, and it'd be good to get a taste of what's doing there, especially in light of the new session. So,
agreed.
Right on.
Cool.
Anything else? All right. I guess that's going to do it. Mike Harris, Goals public policy guys. Always awesome having you here. Thanks
Appreciate being here. Man. Thanks for having me.
That's it for today. Thanks for listening in. Be sure to subscribe to the Goal Podcast and check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/Goal Podcast MA, on YouTube at the Goal Podcast, or on Twitter at Goal Update.
To join Goal, visit goal.org and click the Join Renew button on the top of the homepage.
If you have a topic you think we should cover, if there's something going on in your club or town, or if you have a question for the mailbag, shoot an email at goalpodcast@goal.org.
The Goal Podcast is a production of Gun Owners Action League of Massachusetts. The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guests, Mike,
don't necessarily reflect
and do not
those.
necessarily reflect those of Goal, its staff, or affiliates.